Hi everyone. I was at the Zurich Forum for Applied Sports Science this week, which is just an interesting conference. I've been a few times. There's some good some lectures going on, and I got to talking to some people, and I talked to a gentleman for a pretty long time, and what he asked me or what we discussed was where to optimally place your Moxie, so your NIRS sensor, for threshold testing if you're running. And I think it's a pretty good question. And I'm going to quickly talk about general placement in threshold testing. And so first, there's a paper by Wang and colleagues where they look at, for cycling, they look at if you're placing a sensor on your gastrocnemius, so on your calf, or on your VL, so on your quad. And they actually show that very similar things are happening, and both are valid to find breaking points in muscle oxygenation. So if you're cycling, it's both is possible, but the data shows that the correlation between those breaking points and other threshold data is better on the quads. So for cycling, and it makes a lot of sense, the quad is probably the best muscle, with the VL on the outside being the most pragmatic one to use. And that's what we recommend to people. Now, if you're running, it becomes a little bit more complex. And there is a paper that uses NIRS that looks at gastroc and vastus lateralis muscle oxygenation in running at different speeds. And it's by, I'm pronouncing this right, Hiroyuki and colleagues. And they showed that there are differences in oxygenation trends. Well, they're not that big, and they both show the same things and show the same trends with increasing intensities. There is some difference in the way that they deoxygenate. So we need to kind of think about that and what we're going to do. And why those differences exist make a lot of sense when you look at muscle activation when you're running. So when you're running, you have muscle activation to propel you forward, and you have muscle activation that's kind of braking. It's catching your strides, right? Because in running, you're basically jumping. So you always have to push off and catch yourself. So there's braking, there's propulsion, and there's braking activation. And the longer your strides get, the faster you go and the longer your strides get, the more you have this kind of braking situation, and the intensity of that increases a lot. Of course, your propulsion does also, but your braking really increases. And if you think about that, what happens is if we take the VL and we take the gastroc, the VL is going to be much more, in relation to the gastroc, active in this catching and braking than it is in comparison to the gastroc in propulsion. Whereas in propulsion, the gastroc is really this muscle that's propelling you forward, isn't doing as much catching, where your quad is doing a lot of the catching of every stride. So what happens is when we want to do a running test and we're looking for thresholds and nice curves, you need to realize that at low intensities where you have short strides, especially like me or someone who's not a fast runner, so you're not starting at high speeds, you're starting with short strides. There's not that much catching going on in relation to the propulsion. So sometimes the curves at the beginning when you're looking on your VL, it's not that much is happening. And then they're, let's say, not so nice. Where the gastroc, you see much more activity happen. You also get a much nicer, what we call like a warm-up picture, where you get an increase in oxygenation. You see that much better in the gastroc than you do in the VL. Now, however, as intensity goes up and your strides get longer, and the VL really has to start catching, you actually see then that the gastroc and the VL, the trends, they come much closer together than what they would be at the beginning. So that being said, you can use your VL, or rectus femoris, I think is probably actually even better for running than your VL. And it's gonna show you very similar things to measuring your gastroc. But I do think that for running specifically, there might be some advantages in choosing your gastroc over, especially at lower intensities, where you get a nicer picture and separation of these, especially if you want to kind of do these warm-up zones. So cycling, clearly VL. I think that's the most reasonable solution, is just to use your VL. We can argue those things too, but I think that's the way to go. Running, not as clear. I would recommend, kind of a 60-40, use your gastroc, but in some situation, the quad's fine. If you're going to use the quad, rectus femoris, so in the middle of your quad, might be better to use, from my experience, than vastus lateralis, but that still works fine. Another advantage of the gastroc, as mentioned, is you tend to have less adipose tissue, so you get a nicer signal. Around your quad, you tend to have more adipose tissue, so that's another advantage of using the gastroc. I hope that helps with choosing your site for your oximeter or for your NIRS sensor. Thank you very much for listening. Have a great evening.